Mr. President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about the budget proposal that's been offered by the Senate Republicans that will help Nebraska families and all American families to have a brighter future. For far too long, families have been paying more and forced to expect less from an increasingly inefficient and out-of-touch federal government. While we've made progress, our economy is not where it should be. And unfortunately, the government spending habits, well, they remain unsustainable. Our $18 trillion debt, it isn't just a threat to our economic security, it is a threat to our national security. It's time to offer bold solutions, and we need to tackle these problems. Republicans were sent to Congress to stop, I believe, this irresponsible mentality, to stop the wasteful spending. We need to balance our budget, and we need to allow our economy to grow and flourish. Families all across this nation, they've been forced to tighten their belts. Now it's Washington's turn. Mr. President, I'm here today to highlight some of these initiatives and show what Senate Republicans are doing to safeguard the hard-earned tax dollars entrusted to us by the American people. Back home, many Nebraskans are wondering how this budget will affect their families and their lives. With that in mind, the budget we have presented will adhere to three basic rules: cut spending, balance the budget, and do it all without raising taxes. This budget cuts $5.1 trillion in spending over 10 years. The budget preserves the spending caps put in place by the Budget Control Act. And like many of my colleagues on the Armed Services Committee, I believe national defense must be the federal government's #1 top priority. I have the honor of serving as chairman of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. So I fully understand the very real threats that our nation faces each and every day. But in order for us to ensure that our military men and women have the resources and the training that they need to fulfill the missions that we give them, we must make hard decisions and we must set priorities. Some red lines, Mr. President, just won't disappear. The red ink of our debt is here to stay unless we make some real changes. Our budget preserves the needed pressure to compel Congress to make those hard decisions in order to properly fund the security of our nation. This budget also provides much-needed resources for infrastructure improvements all across our nation. It does this through a deficit-neutral reserve fund to build our crumbling infrastructure with a new highway bill in May. The budget resolution provides this mechanism so that a bill can move forward, allowing authorizers to find either new revenue or offsets in order to extend the life of the Highway Trust Fund. Ultimately, the committees of jurisdiction have to write the policies, and the deficit neutral reserve fund gives them the flexibility to do so. As chairman of the Commerce Subcommittee on Surface Transportation and Merchant Marine Infrastructure, Safety and Security, I know that there is much work to do on our roads, our bridges, our ports, our harbors. I also believe that infrastructure is another core duty, another core responsibility of the federal government. And for us to meet that responsibility, we do have to learn to live within our means. Second, this budget doesn't raise a dime in taxes, not one dime. The answer to our debt crisis isn't taxing hardworking Americans more. Rather, the answer rests in a government that's wiser, a more prudent steward of those tax dollars that every American entrusts us to spend wisely. This is a very timely topic because millions of Americans are preparing to file their taxes right now. An estimate from the National Taxpayer Advocate in 2013 indicates that Americans collectively spend 6.1 billion hours and $168 billion on efforts to navigate through our very confusing tax code and to file their taxes. You know, hardworking Americans, including many who work 2 or 3 jobs to support their families, they should not be expected to dedicate these countless hours to comply with all these burdensome requirements. Nor should they spend their money and have to hire expensive accountants to do so. When the income tax was first ratified in 1913, the entire tax code, it was 400 pages. Well, today's tax code and the regulated rules now total more than 73,000 pages. While these regulations cause stress and frustration for families, they also create financial hardships that hold back businesses and they hold back job creators. Tax Day is an annual reminder that our complex laws desperately need to be reformed. I remain committed to promoting a simpler, fairer tax system that provides certainty and one that encourages economic growth. Moreover, the vast majority of economists agree that the single best way to create jobs, the single best way to generate economic growth, that is through comprehensive tax reform. This budget sets us on a path towards that needed reform, and it's my hope that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that they'll work with us so that we can accomplish this. Let's take a moment now and look at the President's budget proposal. His plan would raise taxes by $1.8 trillion to pay for new spending. I think the President's budget is tone deaf. It's tired. It's the same old tax and spend policies that, got us into this mess in the first place. There's nothing in it that actually cuts spending or addresses this mounting debt. Under the President's budget, interest rates alone, they'll triple from the $229 billion that we currently spend to more than $769 billion a year. Let me repeat that. We currently spend more than $229 billion per year on our interest alone, and that's going to triple to over $750 billion by 2025. That's money that we could use to reinvest in our military, that we can pay down our national debt, or that we could use to improve our nation's infrastructure. I think the President's proposal is a recipe for a national disaster. Our budget offers a realistic way forward. Importantly, this budget helps to keep Congress on track regarding the appropriations process. For the first time in a long time, Congress is meeting the budgetary deadlines as prescribed by law. Passing appropriation bills on time, that allows us to provide the American people with more certainty in their planning for their futures. Mr. President, I've been a member of the United States Senate for 2 years. In that time, I have seen firsthand the regulatory burden that is hindering our small businesses and preventing growth. I've seen the regulatory burden that hurts families and makes it hard for them to get ahead. Our budget provides a framework to lighten that burden of government and reduce the cost of responding to Washington bureaucrats. Because of the spending reductions in this budget, the CBO has estimated the size of the economy. It will grow by 1.5% per person in 2025. That's going to provide an additional $1,200 in income to families each year. That is the type of growth that Nebraskans care about. With additional money in their pocket, middle-class families, they can save more and they can reinvest in their children and their future potential. They can buy a home. They can save for their kids' education. They can put something away for their retirement or maybe take a family vacation. In order to make this budget work, we have to address things that don't. This week marks the 5th anniversary of Obamacare. That is a law that does not work. Obamacare has been harming our economy and millions of families ever since it was signed into law. I have been contacted by over 19,000 Nebraskans who expressed to me their concerns and their frustrations with this law. Passage of this budget provides Congress the chance to send a bill to the President's desk to repeal and replace Obamacare once and for all. I'd also like to touch on some of the amendments that I will be introducing and explain how they will help Nebraska's families and Americans all across this nation. My amendments cover a broad range of topics from national defense to pay equity, education, and regulatory relief. My amendments help families. They help families to have more economic security, and they ensure our own national security. One amendment, which passed yesterday with bipartisan support, will bolster the basic principle of equal pay for equal work. It reinforces and it updates existing law to protect employees from retaliation for seeking information or discussing their salaries. And my non-retaliation language, it closely tracks one of President Obama's April 2014 executive orders on that very same issue. This is a common sense approach to a very important issue that impacts women all across our nation. I've also worked across the aisle with Senator Angus King from Maine on an incentive-based paid family and medical leave proposal. Our idea is not more that one-size-fits-all red tape. It's a tax incentive for employers, particularly employers of hourly and low-wage workers. It offers a limited amount of paid leave so that workers can meet the complex family needs that they have. Mr. President, a common complaint that I hear from Nebraskans is regulatory overreach, particularly with the EPA. And that's why I've offered an amendment that would prohibit the consideration of greenhouse gas emissions under the National Environmental Policy Act. The Obama administration has proposed guidance on how federal agencies should consider greenhouse gas emissions and climate change impacts while conducting NEPA reviews. And this was not the intent of NEPA. And regulations like these could cause significant project delays. In my home state of Nebraska, NEPA reviews already take far too long, especially when it comes to our highway projects. Time and resources are being wasted on bureaucratic paperwork that adds no meaningful environmental benefits. My amendment would stop these burdens and end the unnecessary process that would delay operations without improving environmental outcomes. The American people, Mr. President, they want a government that abides by common sense principles. And it is our responsibility to ensure their money is being responsibly used by this government, by us. Every day that we move forward and that we move our country forward, if we can not add the burdens on the American people, that's a good day. This budget is a step in that direction. It provides the right tools to rescue a prosperous America for future generations. We have a responsibility to offer a better future, to offer a better future than the one that we were handed. So let's step up to the plate and make that happen. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.